So we got to page 148 and we are at lesson 30, the permissibility of reciting for healing, ruqyah, and asking Allah by the status of the righteous. So this lesson was given by Al-Hafiz, the scholar of Islamic law, Al-Faqih, Al-Shaykh Abdullah, the son of Muhammad Al-Abdari. May Allah have mercy upon him. And it talks about the permissibility of reciting for healing and the permissibility of asking Allah by the status of the prophets and the righteous pious Muslims during their lives and after their deaths. Shaykh Samir, the son of Sami Al-Qadi, heard it from him. Shaykh Abdullah, may Allah have vast mercy upon him, said, "All praise is due to Allah, the Lord of the worlds. To Him belong the endowments and proper commendations. May Allah raise the rank of our Master Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam and his Muslim relatives, and protect his nation from that which the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam fears for it." Thereafter, we have been made to narrate from the book of At-Tirmidhi that the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wasallam said, "Inna ar-ruqa wat-tama'im wat-tiwala shirkun." It means indeed the recitation which contains worship of jinn or statues and talismans and the sorcery that women do to harm their husbands is shirk. So these things, ar-ruqa is a recitation which contains worship of the jinn or statues, and at-tama'im are the talismans, and at-tiwala is the sorcery that women do to harm their husbands, wal-'iyadhu billah. The recitation for healing, ar-ruqa, is what is recited on the sick person or the one hurt through sorcery or a jinn. If what is recited contains dhikr, mentioning Allah, or recitation of the Quran, then it is permissible. The talismans are the beads that the non-Muslims in the ignorance era used to hang on their children to protect them from the evil eye. These talismans are the ones that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam named as shirk. The recitation, if it contained calling the jinn or the idols, then that is associating partners with Allah. The term ar-ruqa is the plural of ruqyah, and the term tama'im is the plural of tamimah. The talismans are not the same as the small pouches that contain verses from the Quran or dhikr. Rather, the talismans that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam called shirk are the talismans that the non-Muslims during the era of ignorance used to hang on the chests of their infants, believing that they, by their nature, give protection, not with the belief that Allah made it a cause for protection from the harm of the jinn or sorcery. Rather, they used to believe that these beads, they, by their nature, protect the one who wears it. As for the recitation for healing that contains some verses from the Quran in it, or dhikr, then it is permissible by consensus among the scholars of Islam. The Muslims have remained from the time of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam up till now, reciting to heal with what contains dhikr. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam recited to heal, but the idol worshippers used to recite with things that contain kufr, blasphemy, like calling on the devils for salvation and the like. As for the term tiwala, it is the sorcery that some women do to harm their husbands, and that also contained a type of kufr, blasphemy. This is the meaning of the hadith, إِنَّ الرُّقَى وَالتَّمَائِمَ وَالتِّوَلَ شِرْكٌ. So this clarifies for us the proper position, which is that these things that the Prophet ﷺ judged as forbidden, these things are things that involve calling out to the devils, seeking the devils out for healing or for salvation, which is a form of worship, and believing that those devils have the power to create. And the same thing with the talismans. Some of them are very popular even among the non-Muslims, in today's world, that they have it's like an eyeball painted blue, and they think that this is going to protect them from the evil eye just by the nature of that eyeball. They believe that that eyeball itself is what protects them, and not not something else. And they believe the eyeball itself is what protects them and not something else. Not that Allah made these things protect them. No, they believe that those amulets, those talismans, those eyeballs themselves, they believe that those eyeballs themselves create the protection. And of course that would be blasphemy, because they believe that those eyeballs themselves protect, and that those eyeballs themselves create the protection. But in any case, if someone doesn't believe that those eyeballs themselves create the protection, then they don't blaspheme, but it is those eyeballs themselves, Allah Ta'ala did not make any protection occur by wearing those. So some people just wear it for jewelry, na'udhu billah. But it's something that has no basis Islamically. So it's not permissible to wear those. The author said, the Prophet recited for healing with more than one recitation. One of them is Bismillahi arqiq min kulli shay'in yu'dhik wa min sharri kulli nafsin aw 'aynin hasid Allahu yashfik. So the Prophet ﷺ used to say these words to heal the person, and he used the term, and he used the verb that is derived from ruqya. He said, Bismillahi arqiq. And so those are the root letters of ar-ruqya, and it's referring to ar-ruqya. So it means, starting with the name of Allah, I do ruqya on you. And it means, starting with the name of Allah, I recite for you to be healed from everything that harms you and from the evil of every self or envious eye. May Allah cure you. This recitation for healing, Jibreel taught it to the Prophet ﷺ. As for the pouches that the Muslims young and old hang on their chest, in which is written dhikr or verses from the Quran, then this is permissible by consensus of the Muslims. None of the Muslims ever said it was forbidden. But those misguided Wahhabis said it is unlawful. So just like the Mawlid, those Wahhabis, they're the first ones to say that it's forbidden. So for example, the companions, they used to do it. Muslims after that, they used to do it. Wearing the pouches that have the words for protection written on it. They used to do it. And then the only ones who came and said that it was haram was Muhammad ibn Abdul Wahhab 1,000 years after Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam came to the earth. Those misguided Wahhabis said it is unlawful. It is the habit of the Wahhabis that when they see this pouch, hirz, hanging from the chest of a person, they try to cut it off the person's neck if they are able, and they say shirk. No attention is to be given to what they say because they are ignorant about their Creator. They do not know their Creator because according to them, the Creator is a body sitting on the throne. This creed of theirs is something intellectually impossible. It is not valid in the mind because the body does not create a body. Had God been a body, He would not have created the bodies. Had it been valid for God to be a body that creates the universe, then the sun would be more deserving of being a creator of the universe because its existence is confirmed and its vast benefit is confirmed. As for what the Wahhabis believe about God, that He is a body sitting on the throne, this is not confirmed that it exists, and there is no benefit that is witnessed from it. Therefore, had it been permissible for the body to be God, it would have been valid for the sun to be God. And they, with this kufr of theirs, they think about themselves that they are Muslims and that whoever is not with them is a non-believer. They judge the Muslims as kuffar, non-believers, because they do not say what they say, that God is a body sitting on the throne. Yani they judge us, the Muslims of Ahlus Sunnati wal Jama'ah, as non-Muslims because we don't say that Allah is sitting on the throne. And because the Muslims, when they are happy or when they are in a tough situation, they say, "Oh Muhammad." And they might say in some countries, "Oh Abdul Qadir." And they would ask for help from Shaykh Abdul Qadir al-Jilani, may Allah raise his rank. Or they might say, "Oh Ar-Rifa'i," "Oh Rifa'i," or the like. This calling for help, that is saying, "Oh Muhammad," to the Wahhabis is worshipping other than Allah. They consider it worshipping the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. They say, except if that is said during his lifetime in his presence, then it is not associating partners with Allah. They say, to say, "Oh Muhammad," after his death is associating partners with Allah, and to say it during his life in his absence is associating partners with Allah. This is the religion of the Wahhabis. As for the Muslims, during the time of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, it happened from them that they said, "Oh Muhammad," in his absence and after his death. Up until our days, the Muslims say, "Oh Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam." It is a matter that is agreed upon among the Muslims since the days of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam up until now to say, "Oh Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam," with the intention of calling out for help from him if it was during a time of difficulty, or with the intention of joy if it was not during a time of difficulty. A man by the name of Ahmad ibn Taymiyyah was the first one to forbid asking God by the virtue of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam in his absence, and by the virtue of the prophets and seeking their help. And how many centuries was it that Ahmad ibn Taymiyyah, before he came to this earth, how many centuries after Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam? 6 centuries. 600 years after Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and after the Muslims had already been making tawassul, this person named Ahmad ibn Taymiyyah, he came to say, that this is forbidden and shirk. So truly, he is the misguided one. So a man by the name of Ahmad ibn Taymiyyah was the first one to forbid asking Allah by the virtue of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam in his absence, and by the virtue of the prophets and seeking their help. At-tawassul, which is asking Allah by the status of the Prophet, is asking for help. But the term I seek help, astaghith, or help me, aghithni, means asking for help expression-wise and meaning-wise. As for the term, O Muhammad, it is asking for help in meaning. Because the Muslims, when one of them says, O Muhammad, it could be that the one who says this word is in a tough situation. A calamity befell him. And so he wants the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam to help him to lift this calamity. Because the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam is beneficial in his life and after his death. During his life, he is beneficial by the power of Allah and by the will of Allah. And after his death, he is beneficial by the will of Allah and his power. So what is the difference between saying, O Messenger of Allah, help me, during his life in his presence, and between saying, O Messenger of Allah, help me after his death? So this is even clear for us, because the Wahhabi admits that it's okay to say, O Muhammad, while the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam is alive and there. And so we say, those circumstances, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam being alive or dead, doesn't change the situation, which is asking for help. So asking the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam for help while he is alive, in his presence, what is the understanding of the Muslim that does that? His understanding is the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he helps by the power of Allah and by the will of Allah. Meaning Allah Ta'ala enables the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam to help the Muslim by his power and will. And so we say, after the death of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Allah Ta'ala enables the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam to help the Muslim by his power and will. So what is the difference between saying, O Messenger of Allah, help me, during his life in his presence, and between saying, O Messenger of Allah, help me after his death? God is the only one who creates the benefit, and he is the only one who repels the harm and calamity. Therefore, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam is a means, is a reason, and he is not the one who creates the benefit or the harm for himself or for other than him. Likewise, all the causes, they do not create their effects. For example, bread does not create the satisfying of hunger. Rather, Allah is the one who creates the feeling of being full after eating. And the water does not create the quenching of thirst. Rather, Allah creates the quenching of thirst when water is drank. And medicine does not create the cure. Rather, Allah creates the cure when the medicine is used, and so on. All the causes do not create anything. Rather, Allah is the only one who creates. So the same thing even with the inanimate objects. For example, like medicine. When a Muslim takes medicine, does he commit shirk? No. Does the medicine create the cure? No, only Allah. So we tell the Wahhabi, just ask Allah to cure you. Do not take the medicine. Go directly and ask Allah Ta'ala for the cure. What will they say? They will make something up, as they usually do, with all the matters that refute them. Like when they say about the Mawlid, they say the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, every innovation is misguided. And so we say, okay then, get off the internet. Get off technology. They'll say, oh no, not those innovations. Not the worldly innovations, only the religious ones. So we say, well then that means that there are some innovations that are not misguided. Because if they say there's some innovations that are not misguided, then they're saying the same thing that we are. They say, no, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam was referring to religious innovations. Well, you see the mihrab, this semicircular thing, that is an innovation. You see the dots in the Quran, that is an innovation. You see the 2 adhans after the Jumu'ah or during the Jumu'ah, that is an innovation. You see all the Muslims praying Taraweeh behind one Imam in congregation, that is an innovation. But then they say, oh no, well, this and that and that and this, and they make excuses. But doesn't that mean that there are some innovations that are not misguided? The answer is yes. So same thing here with calling the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam for help. They say that it's okay to do if the Prophet is alive and you are in his presence. And so we say the Muslim, when he calls the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam for help in his life, in his presence, he is doing it with the understanding that only Allah creates benefit or harm, and that the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam is given the ability by Allah to help the Muslim. And the same thing after the death of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that the Muslim, he asks the Prophet for help, not with the understanding that the Prophet creates benefit and harm, rather with the understanding that Allah enables the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam to help him. So there is no difference. It's just that the Wahhabis, their hearts have been corrupted. They are extremists. They are misguided. Their hearts have been poisoned. Na'udhu billah. When the Wahhabis judge as a non-Muslim whoever seeks help from the Prophet or the righteous pious Muslims, by that they are judging all the Muslims with misguidance and blasphemy. The scholars have the habit of mentioning that the one who is struck with paralysis in their leg, he says, "O Muhammad." The companions, some of them did this, and those who came after them did this. Abdullah, the son of Umar, the son of Al-Khattab, may Allah raise his and his father's rank, was struck with paralysis. And so some people told him, mention the most beloved person to you. And so he said, "O Muhammad," and the paralysis went away immediately. What Abdullah, the son of Umar, did, according to the Wahhabis, is blasphemy of associating partners with Allah. Yani according to them, what Abdullah, the son of Umar, did is shirk, according to them. And Abdullah, the son of Umar, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam testified that he is righteous. So they can't get around it either. They walk back their stance that the one who says, "O Muhammad," is shirk, or they accuse the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam of saying about someone who commits shirk that they are a righteous man. The Muslims of the past and the later Muslims were not safe from the Wahhabis. And despite that, the Wahhabis call themselves Salafis in order to make people think that they follow what the Prophet ﷺ and the companions were on. And their creed and their actions are in opposition to the Salaf and to the companions and the followers of the companions and whoever follows them until this day and age. We return to the case of reciting for healing. The scholars said it is not permissible to recite for healing using words with which the meaning of is unknown. And so this is different than reciting for healing using the Quran and words of dhikr. Using words that their meanings are not known is forbidden to use as recitation for healing. This thing that is called al-birhatiyya is not Arabic, and God knows best what language it is. If it becomes confirmed from a trustworthy person that they are the names of Allah in other than the Arabic language, then the heart would be tranquil in using it. The precaution is to recite for healing using the verses of the Quran and dhikr, which has been narrated from the Prophet ﷺ in the books of hadith. The precaution is to suffice with this. The Quran and the perfect names of Allah are enough. The Quran contains a great blessing, especially if the reciter was pious. There was a pious scholar in our land of Harar. Any person who had been stricken by the jinn, he used to recite this verse on him. The verse from Surah Yunus only. Allahu adhina lakum am ala Allahi taftarun. And the jinn would fly away from the inflicted person. Then after this sheikh died, a man wanted to do as that sheikh used to do. So he recited on the inflicted person, and the jinn said, the verse is the same verse, but the reciter is not the same reciter. So that concludes lesson 30. Now we are on lesson 31. Are there any questions before moving on? How is the sound, the voice? We do apologize. There are no microphones here today and no sound system here today. We had a celebration yesterday, and so that equipment was used for that, and it still hasn't been reinstalled. So we do apologize for any inconvenience. But as long as you can hear, then the benefit occurs. Lesson 31. Reflecting upon the creations of Allah and clarifying the bad understanding of the Wahhabis. This lesson was given by Al-Hafiz, the scholar of Islamic law, Shaykh Abdullah, the son of Muhammad Al-Abdari. May Allah have mercy upon him, in Beirut. And it is about explaining the obligation of thinking about the creations of Allah, to deduce that Allah exists and His attributes exist, and explaining about the bad understanding of the Wahhabis. This lesson was heard from him by Shaykh Muhammad, the son of Mustafa Al-Bakri, Shaykh Nabil, the son of Muhammad Al-Sharif, Shaykh Samir, the son of Sami Al-Qadi, and Shaykh Jamil, the son of Muhammad Halim. Shaykh Abdullah, may Allah have vast mercy upon him, said, all praise is due to Allah, the Lord of the worlds. To Him belong the endowments and proper commendations. May Allah raise the rank of our Master Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam and his Muslim relatives, and protect his nation from that which the Prophet ﷺ fears for it. Therefore, thereafter, reflecting upon the creations of Allah is an obligation to deduce by that the existence of God and His power, and that He is eternal and everlasting. So the evidence for us, the Muslims, is the rational evidence. We use the power of deduction. So we say, for example, I was nothing, then I began to exist. My existence was without my will. I had no choice to exist. I was powerless in choosing my features, my skin color, my gender, the time of birth, the time that I was born. So all of this proves what? That I didn't create myself. And another human also did not create me. My mother and my father, they did not choose my skin color. They did not choose my gender. They did not choose my date of birth. It was something that was specified also by other than them. They did not make me exist, rather my existence was given by the one whose existence has no beginning, and that is the creator of the universe. I submit and admit through the mental evidence that I have a creator, and that creator is unlike us, because if he had been like us in any way, then he would not be able to create, just as we are not able to create. Reflecting upon the creations to know this is an obligation. That is, with this amount to reach to the proof of the existence of Allah, and that He is eternal and everlasting, and that He does not resemble anything. Because the one who knows that the universe changes, knows that there is the one who specifies it with change, and he knows that the one who specifies it with change does not change. This is the benefit of thinking about the creations. As for thinking about the being of Allah, it is prohibited, because the one who tries to think about the being of Allah, to imagine Him, he will only reach likening Allah to the creations. That is why Allah forbade us from thinking about His being, and He ordered us to think about His creations. Among that is that the person knows that he exists after having been non-existent, and it is understood from this that he inevitably has a creator who brought him into existence, and that the creator who made him exist is not a creation, rather He is eternal. His existence has no beginning. This is called a proof for the existence of Allah, His attribute of eternity and everlastingness, and His non-resemblance to the creation. Because when the person knows about himself and this universe, all of that changes. Then he knows that these things have to have a creator. Yani when the human being knows about himself that he changes, when the human being knows about the universe that it changes, then he knows that he and the universe need a creator. We and the universe have to have a creator who created them, and that the one who created them does not resemble them in any way. Those Wahhabis are deprived of this thinking. They just can't get it. Their heads, their minds just can't understand it. And the reason for that is because their hearts have been corrupted with the poison of likening Allah to the creations. Those Wahhabis are deprived of this thinking, and they said that God is a body sitting on the throne and He has organs. So they committed kufr about their Creator. They are ignorant of their Creator. Think about the creations of Allah and do not think about the being of Allah. These are the words of Abdullah, the son of Abbas. May Allah raise both their ranks. It is not a hadith of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, but the meaning is taken from the Quran and Surah Al-A'raf. أَوَلَمْ يَنْظُرُوا فِي مَلَكُوتِ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ وَمَا خَلَقَ اللَّهُ مِنْ شَيْءٍ. This verse proves that thinking about the kingdom of the skies and the earth is urged and important. The Wahhabis do not know the Creator from the creation. Yani they don't know how to distinguish between the Creator and the creation. Rather, according to them, God is a body and the human is a body and the throne is a body and light is an impalpable body and darkness and the soul. All of them, some of them are impalpable bodies and some of them are palpable bodies. They believe that God is like the human, having a body and two parts, an upper part and a lower part, to the extent that they believe that He is sitting on the throne. Anything that sits has two halves, a top half and a lower half. They believe that God is like His creation. They do not know the Creator from the creation, and despite this gross ignorance, they believe about themselves that they are the Muslims and that other than them are non-believers, which is another reason that they are judged as non-Muslims, is that they judge the entire Muslim nation as non-Muslims unjustly. And also by them claiming that the entire Muslim nation has fallen out of Islam, they have contradicted the consensus that the majority of the Muslims, they will remain upon the correct creed. This verse in Surah Ash-Shura is enough to clear Allah from resembling anything. لَيْسَ كَمِثْلِهِ شَيْءٍ. However, the one whose heart has been sealed by God would hear this verse without understanding its meaning. However, the one who has his heart opened by God would understand from it that God is not a palpable volume nor an impalpable volume, and He is not among the attributes which the palpable and impalpable volume is attributed with. And He is not attributed with the attributes that the palpable and impalpable volumes are attributed with. Because the term thing includes the impalpable body and the palpable body, and the attributes of the impalpable and palpable volumes. Therefore, it is understood to the one whose heart has been opened by Allah that Allah is not a palpable body like the sun and the moon, and is not an impalpable body like the wind and light, and that He is not like the attributes of the palpable and impalpable body. So he understands from this that Allah is not attributed with movement or stillness, because movement and stillness are attributes of the bodies, because Allah created the bodies in three kinds. One kind is always moving like the stars, and one kind is always still like the throne, and one kind moves at times and is still at other times, like the human and the jinn and the angels. Also, he understands that the attributes of God are not like the attributes of the creation. He understands that the life of Allah is not an attribute that was preceded by non-existence. Rather, his life has no beginning. He understands that the power of Allah and the will of Allah are not like the power of the creations and their will, because the power of the creations and their will has a beginning and it accepts to increase and decrease. Likewise, he understands that the hearing of God and his sight are not a created hearing and a created sight. Rather, God hears the sounds and sees the bodies with an eternal hearing and sight. He also understands that the speech of Allah is not an utterance with letters, because letters are created, they are not eternal. All of the languages were non-existent. Allah created them after they were non-existent, and God is eternal. A created attribute does not occur to his being. And he understands also that the speech of God as his life has no beginning and no end, and it is not in segments. Therefore, he understands that the speech of Allah, which is an attribute of Allah, it does not have It does not have interruptions as what happens to the speech of the creations. The creation, when they are first born, they do not speak. And then after that they speak a speech that has segments. He speaks, then he is silent, then he speaks, then he is silent. And that pertains to us, the creations. So we have a speech, we talk, and then we stop talking. We talk and then we stop talking. It is understood from this verse that the speech of Allah is not a speech of letters and sounds. Rather, it exists and it is eternal and everlasting. That is not a letter nor a sound. God enables whomever He wills to hear it in this worldly life. As for the hereafter, all the humans will hear the speech of God, just as it was mentioned in the authentic hadith. ما من أحد منكم إلا سيكلمه ربه يوم القيامة من غير ترجمان ولا حاجب. It means each one of you will hear the speech of Allah on Judgment Day without an intermediary or a blockage. Allah will judge His creations with that speech that is not a letter nor a sound, and their judgment will finish in a span of time, despite the large numbers of creations from the humans and jinn, because it is mentioned in the Quran in Surah Al-An'am, وَهُوَ أَسْرَعُ الْحَاسِبِينَ. The meaning is that the judgment of Allah is faster than anyone who judges. If His speech that He judges the creation with on Judgment Day were like our speech, then God would have been the slowest of judges. The Quran that we recite, God did not recite it with letters. Rather, He ordered it to be written in the guarded tablet, and then He ordered Jibreel to take it and to recite it on our Master Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam. And so Jibreel did that. As for the one who believes that God recited the Quran upon Jibreel with letters and words, and then Jibreel recited it upon our Master Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam, then he has likened Allah to His creation. If you have the hard copy, then change the word resembled to likened. The one whose heart was opened by Allah would use as evidence لَيْسَ كَمِثْلِهِ شَيْءٍ, to know that it had been possible, to know that Had it been possible for God to be attributed with a speech like the speech of the creations, or a power like the power of the creations, or hearing and sight like the hearing and sight of the creations, or a speech made up of letters that precede one another, then it would have been possible for God to be attributed with everything that is possible for the creations to be attributed with, like weakness, death, and sickness. All of this would have been possible. Therefore, whatever leads to that is impossible to be attributed to Allah. The one whom God has opened his heart understands from this verse all of that from لَيْسَ كَمِثْلِهِ شَيْءٍ. Yani, so if someone were to say that God is attributed with a body, then it would lead to saying that God is attributed with weakness, that God is attributed with inexistence, that God is attributed with death. Because if God was like us, then what is possible for us would be possible for him. If God was similar to us, then the things that apply to us would apply to him. Because similars, the things that are similar apply to each other. Yani, when something is similar to another thing, whatever applies to its similar. So similars, they have that relationship. What does that mean? For example, when I see another human being, it's not a mystery for me how they were born. I know that they have a mother and they have a father, and that mother and that father, they got together in that specific way, and that's how they were born. I know that. And I know that this human being, he had to be born. He is the product of two other human beings. I know that human being, when he was born, he couldn't speak or talk or walk or help himself. That he was just a little tiny baby. Then after some time, he began to grow and change and crawl and walk, etc., until they learn to talk, etc. I know that about them, even though I never met them before. This is what it means, that what applies to me applies to the one who is similar to me. What matters is the proper understanding, not just reading and memorizing a lot. There are among the Wahhabis those who memorize the entire Quran, but they believe the opposite of the Quran. Ibn Taymiyyah memorized a lot. He memorized thousands of hadith with the chains. And despite that, God did not open the seal on his heart. And so he began to believe that God is a body sitting on the throne, and that he has organs, and that he moves and stays still, and that every night he physically descends to the first sky, and then he spends another third of the night in it, and then he goes back to the throne. This is a calamity that came to them from their bad understanding when they heard the hadith, يَنْزِلُ رَبُّنَا كُلَّ لَيْلَةٍ إِلَى السَّمَاءِ الدُّنْيَا حين يبقى ثلث الليل الأخير ويقول هل من داع فأستجيب له وهل من مستغفر فأغفر له وهل من سائل فأعطيه حتى ينفجر الفجر. It means God sends an angel down every night to the first sky during the last third of the night, and the angel says, is there anyone supplicating so it will be answered? Is there anyone seeking forgiveness so he will be forgiven? Is there anyone asking for something so it will be granted? Until dawn appears. They understood this hadith literally, and so they said that God comes down physically, moves from the throne to the first sky, They did not say that God orders angels to descend. Rather, they said that God descends physically. This is not the meaning of the hadith. Rather, the meaning of the hadith is that angels come down by the order of Allah. In some places, in the religious text in Arabic, the verb would be used to refer to an action among the actions of the creations that is done by the order of Allah, because that action of the creation occurs by the order of Allah. They did not pay attention to the impossible matter that results from their interpretation of this descending by saying that God comes down physically. That impossible thing is that night and day differ depending on the different places on earth. So every part of the day there is night in another part of the world. Therefore, if they had paid attention to the corruption of their understanding, they would have known that this leads to saying that every moment God is descending and ascending, going up and down in every moment of the night and day. This contradicts their saying that He is sitting on the throne. Their minds are silly. They do not understand the verse nor the hadith according to what befits to be said about Allah. And they do not understand whether this is in agreement with the mind or contradicting the mind. The meaning of the hadith is that the angels descend by the order of God from their places above the first sky, and then they convey in the first sky until the dawn appears. They convey these words as they were ordered by God, that whoever supplicates, he will be answered. And whoever seeks forgiveness, he will be forgiven. They convey from Allah. They do that until dawn. Then at dawn, they ascend to their places which they are ordered with dwelling in. The angels are numerous. A part of them descends to a part of the earth every night, according to the last third of the night in that part of the earth. This is the meaning of the hadith. It does not mean that God comes down physically. It is as if they are saying that God physically comes down depending on where it is the last third of the night. Therefore, according to their corrupt saying, God does not do anything else except going up and down. And Allah Ta'ala knows best. So what does that mean? What is that telling us? Number one, that those Wahhabis, that they don't care about making sense. They don't care about attributing things that are invalid to attribute to Allah. They just use their desires and interpret the Quran however they want. They do not use their minds. They do not use logic. They do not use the mental evidence. Rather, they say, oh, the verb yanzilu was used. That automatically means that God comes down. We say, no, the Arabic language is vast. In Arabic, you can say, Al-Amiru Bana al-Masjid. You can say, the prince built the mosque. Like they say there was a king, a Muslim king, and he had a Muslim son. And that Muslim son, he wanted to build the mosque. And so he hired people to build it because he's wealthy, he has the money, he can buy all the resources, he can buy the materials, he can hire the people to build it and order them to build it. And then once it's built, he dedicates it as a masjid. So in Arabic you could say, the prince built the masjid. But does that mean that the prince himself laid down the bricks of the masjid? Did the prince himself put the pillars up in the masjid? Did the prince himself do any of the physical labor? No. But we can say the prince built the masjid, meaning the prince ordered for the masjid to be built. The masjid was built because that prince gave that order, because that prince bought the materials and hired the people and made it be built. So in the same type of linguistic style, the hadith Yanzilu Rabbuna is mentioned. Yani Allah Ta'ala orders an angel to descend. That angel descends the last third of the night. The angel says, is there anyone seeking forgiveness so he may be forgiven? Is there anyone asking for something so it can be granted? Is there anyone that has a need so it'll be fulfilled? Until the Fajr prayer time starts. And it happens like that in the last third of the night everywhere in the world. The Wahhabis don't understand that. They say that God physically comes down every last third of the night. So when you tell them it's the last third of the night somewhere in the world at all times, according to them, that Allah is going up and down, up and down, up and down all night long, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, na'udhu billah. And that is due to their ill understanding of the religious texts. We ask Allah Ta'ala to make us steadfast to the creed of Ahlul Sunnati wal Jama'ah, to make us die as pious Muslims, and to make our final words, La ilaha illallah, Muhammadun Rasulullah, sallallahu alayhi wasallam. Next week, inshallah, we will do lesson 32, warning against belittling the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam, and refuting some of the fallacies of the atheists, and proving that there is no creator except Allah. If there are no questions, we'll conclude. طيب نهلل لا إله إلا الله اللهم صل على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم رب اغفر لي وللمؤمنين والمؤمنات وبارك الله فيكم السلام عليكم